Welcome to Beyond Your Limits, the series where we step past the highlight reels and into the stories that shape the modern athlete. I'm Greg Hoffman, and in each episode, we explore the minds and moments of those redefining what it means to play the game and build a brand and a business that lasts beyond it. Today on Beyond Your Limits, we're joined by Chase Garrett, sports industry leader, entrepreneur, and a founder of Icon Source, one of the first true athlete brand marketplaces and the platform behind the first ever college NIL deal. From racing motocross professionally to leading athlete marketing at Red Bull, Chase has worked alongside some of the world's most iconic athletes on the biggest stages in sport, from the Super Bowl to the Olympics. In this conversation, we'll explore the evolution of athlete branding and what it means to build beyond your limits. Chase, welcome.
Thanks, Greg. Glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, hopefully 2026 has gotten off to a great start for you. I don't know about you, but the holidays were great as a sports enthusiast. So many great college football games. I'm not just saying that because the University of Oregon was in the playoffs, but it was a gift.
Yeah, the holidays are always so fun. Just family coming together and so many good football games to watch. Basketball season's ripping. So
Good. Well, we'll get started, and I thought let's go right to the beginning. You start your career racing motocross before transitioning to athlete marketing and entrepreneurship. And I'm curious, how did being an athlete first change the way you think about influence, ownership, and brand identity once you moved into the business side of sport?
yeah, as an athlete, you're very self-motivated, especially with an individual sport like motocross. You're kind of waking up without an entourage of folks and coaches and teammates, and you're having to be very obsessed with what you're trying to accomplish. And so for me as a young person, I was absolutely obsessed, and it was really, really difficult to sort of imagine anything outside of that. And I think a lot of young people can relate to that. You want to focus on school, you want to focus in other areas of your life, but realistically your sport is kind of the only thing you can think about when you're eating and sleeping and awake. Yeah, I was just extremely driven. I ended up not having a very successful athletic career, but it was able to open doors for me. And I always wanted to be in the world of sports marketing and around athletes and working with athletes. And so, yeah, it was actually the only way that I was able to actually build the career that I have today is because of my time as a young person pursuing the sport.
And when you think back, was there something you maybe didn't fully appreciate as an athlete when you were competing that you now in your role today see really clearly?
Yeah, when I was young, like 12, 13 years old, I thought that athletes just got paid if they're really good at their sport. And whether it's sponsors, whether it's teams, wherever those dollars are coming from, I think as a young person, you just assume the better you are at your sport, the more money you make. And as I've developed and got older, you really get paid because you're making other people money. And so oftentimes being great at a sport and creating influence from that opens those doors. But it kind of demystified it, which is also exciting because I think it's really creative on different ways to leverage that, not only by your performance in the sport, which is a very critical component, but also just how you conduct yourself, how you inspire other people, leveraging the sort of stage that, being an athlete can create.
Okay, so you go from motocross to leading athlete marketing at Red Bull. That's next level, and you've navigated very different roles throughout that time. So what did working at Red Bull teach you about building athlete brands beyond just oftentimes the default of traditional marketing and sponsorships?
Yeah, Red Bull is a very, very unique organization. They're obsessed with authenticity, and it's a privately held company. So they're able to make very bullish decisions that don't necessarily always have a direct sort of ROI that's easily sort of drawn to, because they really want to focus on inspiring consumers. And they believe that if you create authenticity and inspire consumers, that you'll move product and that people will want to engage with your brand. And so, yeah, I went from, all right, I'm obsessed with the sport, I'm obsessed with the activity, and sponsorships just kind of allow you to do that more. And then after being a part of Red Bull, really being obsessed with the art of inspiring consumers through sport and through the creative activations that you can do, because it just opens the door so much more beyond just competition, who's first, second, and third, but really allowing sports to motivate and inspire large groups of people. And I just think that's fascinating.
I mean, what a high standard in terms of pushing the limits of athlete branding. I mean, was there one thing in particular when it comes to building long-term brand equity in an athlete's persona that Red Bull got, but others either missed back then or continue to miss the opportunity?
Yeah, I think, and I get it. A lot of businesses, now that I've kind of evolved my role into a founder and CEO of a company, they're very obsessed with the transactional component of a marketing budget. They're like, all right, if I'm going to put these dollars towards an activation or towards a partnership, I need to clearly and a lot of times in a short timeline see a return on that. And so the problem with that is you typically lose the magic that kind of inspires a consumer, because a consumer is not typically motivated to make an individual more money or to make a brand sales grow. They're motivated to be like something or be like an idea or be like an individual that they believe is amazing. And so the more you're willing to sort of create a gray area between the activation and the investment and your expectations of what the consumers are going to do, a lot of times that's where the really exciting stuff comes together. That's just challenging to do at a company that's not obsessed or not totally all in. And so we've seen influencer marketing and creator marketing grow rapidly. And a lot of times those are new emerging brands that are kind of dipping their toe in. They're doing affiliate marketing stuff where, there's discount codes, everything's very, very trackable. It's very transactional. But I really believe you miss the magic of partnering with an individual to sort of take the creative reins and run with an opportunity. It's hard because a lot of times those dollars are very critical to spend.
Sure.
And if they don't work, you're out of luck. And so it's a challenging thing to do, but it's also very exciting.
Yeah, and I've always believed, I think you do as well, is that the business and the revenue is a consequence. It follows a great business strategy, great brand innovation and creativity around that particular individual or athlete.
Yeah.
And so you've been recognized as a power player in the sports industry. Looking back, what decisions or moments were pivotal in how the industry started to look at you based on your experience? Was there a specific kind of moment or catalyst that put you where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I'd kind of grown and developed through a career as an athlete, helping athletes do deals as an agent, and then at Red Bull, I really felt that athletes were being underutilized. And I felt that, the top 1%, top 5% had teams of people advocating for them and structuring deals and opening up opportunities. But there was a tremendous tail of athletes that just weren't getting a seat at the table. And then on the flip side of that, there was a tremendous group of brands, especially like local brands in different communities, that didn't even know where to begin. How do I even get in touch with an athlete? My uncle knows this guy that's an agent. Maybe you get a shot at one or two folks, but there was no real scaled entry point for brands and athletes to connect. And so it was funny at the time, my roommate was working at Adobe and they hired Lindsey Vonn to come to their holiday party, and they paid her a tremendous amount of money. And I watched this deal come together, and it was pretty convoluted of how challenging it was. And I obviously had a relationship with Lindsey Vonn at Red Bull and knew her agent really well. And I was kind of like I feel like there's a better way to do this, to create these really fruitful partnerships at scale. And so that's when I decided to build Icon Source, which is a marketplace connecting athletes and brands for all types of endorsement deals, from, an appearance to a long-term branded partnership. And so, when I initially started, it was for pro athletes, and not just like your big five sports, but also like Olympic athletes, action sports athletes. And so we built and developed the technology to be able to create these partnerships and actually create contracts and payment facilitation, and all of these steps that I felt were really, really difficult to navigate as a brand that's maybe not endemic or have a deep background in the world of sport. So that's kind of what set the stage from there. And also, I never really anticipated to build a business that was very, very focused on college sports. My background was much more rooted in traditional pro sports, Olympic pro sports, and initially action sports. But with the framework of that, when the college NIL opportunity opened up with the regulation change, we were kind of one of the only folks that had developed a solution to bring these deals together at scale with a huge number of users. And so the reason I think I was probably honored as a power player is the very first college NIL deal that ever came together was just fascinating. We were all scrambling. There was a couple other players in the space. Blake Lawrence at Open Doors, who was always a super nice competitor in the space. Jim Cavale at Influencer. And so it was kind of like us three running to understand, how is this going to shake down? What do we need to do? What are we allowed to do? And there's two girls, Haley and Hannah Cavender, who had built massive social followings on TikTok. And, at the initial stage, they weren't able to monetize that. They were just building this big audience. And so there was all this talk of how much are athletes going to get paid? What's it going to be like? Who's going to be allowed to? What states are going to get to do it? And then randomly, I got a phone call from an unknown number, and it was Tom Cavender. It was the girl's dad.
Oh.
And
Wow.
he was like, yeah, the coach of the Atlanta Hawks gave me your number, which is funny because I don't know the coach of the Atlanta Hawks, but made me feel cool. And he was like, can you help my daughters do deals? And I was like, well, the regulation hasn't changed, but they could sign up on our platform. And so from there, we ended up working an opportunity with the CEO of Boost Mobile. And I was like, hey, how about you do a deal with these girls as soon as the regulation changes at 12:01 a.m. We'll go to New York. We'll do it on the East Coast. It'll be the very first deal. We ended up buying a billboard in Times Square that said, cha-ching, finally college athletes can get paid. And this whole deal kind of just fell in my lap. And it was a really, really exciting time for the evolution of college athletes, but also for me as an entrepreneur, building a business that was being very validated with this. And so I grabbed a lady that I worked with at Red Bull in PR, and we put together a campaign, and we ended up getting 4.2 billion media impressions, cover of USA Today Sports, Wall Street Journal. I mean, it was absolutely insane. And so that kind of set the business on fire, and really opened up a tremendous amount of doors. So it's funny, there's always the questions of, how much of your success is contributed to luck and hard work. And you definitely have to build the sort of system to be able to take advantage of fortunate circumstances, but it's definitely a mixture.
What a journey, and loved. It's great for us as listeners to always hear the hero's journey, if you will, which is never a straight and narrow path.
Absolutely
on that.
not.
And so, not only college sports, but your experience spans everything from working with NFL players to Olympic athletes. How do you adapt your approach depending on what the sport is or who the personality is? Where is that individual athlete on their journey to kind of define themselves and how they want to express their identity at their particular stage? And where do people most often get that wrong in terms of just applying a one-size-fits-all strategy versus really digging deep and understanding the particular athlete and a brand's needs as well?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was at Red Bull, I managed such a range of personality types, from Reggie Bush, Chris Bryant, Victoria Azarenka. So they're kind of like at the high level of global superstars, to 13-year-old snowboarders and bike messengers. And at the end of the day, they all are there to sort of serve a purpose of building credibility to a community. And some of them are very broad, wide range community, and some of them are very specific, deep niche community, but and they have like strong conviction in that. And so I think as you approach how to work with those relationships, you got to first approach people as human beings. And I think athletes are very refreshed when you can just treat them like a colleague or a friend, and you're not sort of like pandering to them or sort of being nervous. Secondly, is giving them creative freedom and buy-in to have decision making in the development of activations. And so I think that's critical when you try to say, hey, this is what we put together in our sort of marketing offsite meeting, and this is exactly what we want you to do. It just doesn't come through as pure and authentic to the end consumer. So whether it's a CrossFit athlete, an action sports snowboarder, I think you can really approach with a very sort of blanket strategy of treat the individual as a person, let them understand sort of what the end goal is, and give input as to how you put it together, and then execute and be very professional. I think that's respected across all levels. If you are very professional, you're very polite, you follow up, you pay people on time, it just goes a long way. And so yeah, I was fortunate to be able to work across a wide span, and a lot of the folks are still good friends of mine today.
It's great. Yeah, you're hammering home, I think, how you led the conversation, which is relationships over transactions, for sure, and that really illustrates that. And you talked about founding Icon Source, essentially the first true athlete brand marketplace. And I love this story about you seeing Lindsey Vonn being invited to a holiday party at Adobe and seeing how maybe complex that deal was just to do something like that. Beyond that, what was the biggest friction point, maybe the lowest hanging fruit that you were able to solve immediately that others were ignoring at that particular time?
Yeah, it's funny when I look back to try to understand, what were the brilliant ideas and what were the mistakes. And a lot of times they're very close. And I think whenever you're building a business, you have to make a lot of assumptions and kind of like in a vacuum. And you take it to market and you're hoping that those are the correct assumptions. Especially when you raise capital, you're kind of forced to make even more assumptions without any market feedback, because you have all this capital to deploy. And so I would say we created this database of real individual athletes. We didn't scrape the most names that were popular. We had individuals actually sign up, build their own profiles that they manage. Like Caitlin Clark has our app on her phone for when she gets deals. And I think that was like a really special thing that we did. And it was from creating trust with the athletes and the individuals. And then, we continued to develop to where, brands were able to build entire campaigns, negotiate back and forth with very specific sort of compensation aspects, whether it's product value, dollars, dollar amounts, bonuses, and then execute that into a contract and then facilitate payment. So somewhere along the lines of that process, I believe we probably overbuilt because you kind of get stuck of, well, then we got to do this, and then you got to do this. And you realize that maybe the most important thing we were able to do is just inspire brands to think about working with athletes by showing them a large directory. So it's definitely been an exciting journey. But I think as a note to future founders is definitely get market feedback as soon as you can, iterate, and don't overbuild until you realize that your customers desperately want it, because every additional sort of development and spend just increases your sort of risk as you go into the market. So some honest feedback right there.
Yeah, well, great lessons, certainly, to anyone looking to, be a part of this particular business. And I guess part of your superpower is, connecting the dots between athletes, brands, agents, opportunities. That's no easy task. I'm sure there's an art and science. What would you say is the biggest challenge when it comes to building trust between these different parties? And how do you maybe you overcome that. I have to think there's certain things that would immediately break trust between parties, and at the end of the day, that loyalty and trust is what a lot of this is built on.
Yeah, I think, a couple of the areas that helped us is we decided to not charge college athletes any fees. So we opened the platform to be completely free to them. I don't know if that was the greatest long-term business decision, but it definitely created some trust with the athletes and the agents. And I really felt that the market has been massively shifting. The reallocation of ad dollars going through traditional media buying agencies and now trying to connect directly to their consumers through authentic voices. That's already been sort of happening through the world of creators and influencers. And I just wanted to create a path for it to be channeled to athletes. So, I don't think we were trying to like ever pull something off that was taking advantage of athletes or the individuals. And I think there definitely were some predatory businesses and individuals as the college NIL opened up. But I think the fact that we had established ourselves in the professional business, my background working at a super respected brand in the world of sports marketing, I think really enabled us to tell that story, create some trust, and then facilitate deals. When we really are reliant on the athletes and the brands kind of operating well together. And I'm actually surprised at how few bad engagements that we actually facilitated. It's like a handful out of over 10,000 deals that we've put together. So, and I think that's also a testament to why it's so great to work with athletes. These are not individuals that have popped up that all of a sudden have a huge audience that you don't know where it came from. It's somebody that's got a track record and a story that has been very committed to their craft since they were a young person. So, kind of banking on the sort of DNA of an athlete and me being very passionate that I felt athletes bring tremendous value to brands that were being overlooked. It all kind of came together. And that's really what drives us is the value that gets exchanged.
Yeah, that's great, and always seeking an equal value exchange on behalf of the athlete and the partners. And you talked about this idea of the DNA of the athlete, and now you're helping to build and promote the business of creativity's Beyond Your Limits course, which is about helping athletes build personal brands beyond just the performance on the court or the field or the pitch. Can you talk a little bit about what happens to an athlete's career, maybe longevity wise, or their identity when they don't start to think about building their business or identity or brand beyond the field of play, if you will?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the main reason that this course and the Beyond Your Limits program stuck out to me is I was watching through our platform, thousands and thousands of deals come together and transact. And I saw there was a huge missing piece. And that was that a lot of these younger athletes they were bringing almost no value to a brand. And the narrative in the college NIL space is how much money athletes are getting paid, how much money they're getting paid. And so I wanted the narrative to be, look at how much value these athletes are now unlocking for businesses. And this is a honeypot for people to invest in, not the narrative being about how much money, how unloyal and, sort of spoiled the kids are. I was like, what can I do? What can I become a part of to sort of create a change there? And so I think that the course is so critical just for how you can learn to conduct yourself as a professional, even beyond your athlete career. But with the athlete career, you work so hard for so long, you deny so many shortcuts to yourself, you deny so many fun times to yourself so that you can be the best or excel at your craft. Then you want to be able to get the most from that. So obviously you want to excel, ideally make it to the professional level or to a college level, but then you want to find ways to let that bring you even more opportunities, whether it's monetary or even just a networking opportunity. I think that, as an athlete builds and establishes their brand, which is essentially, who are you? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? Like, why would somebody want to be friends with you? What does people say about you when you walk out of a room? That's what your brand is. So I think that it's just a very important thing for everybody to put some work into, especially college athletes that are trying to monetize their influence.
When should athletes start thinking this way, looking at themselves as essentially the CEO of their own brand? Is this something that you can start thinking about whether you're an amateur athlete, high school athlete, or a seasoned pro?
Yeah, I think it's definitely smart to start thinking about it at an early age. The high school level is where you can either use your influence to do silly and goofy stuff, and you have these platforms to maybe talk with your friends, but there needs to be a shift where all of a sudden this is a platform that's going to build my sort of brand and communication outwardly. And it's kind of a strange and awkward time. I don't think anybody really addresses how you convince an individual to go from, hey, you need to transition from using this thing to talk with your friends to building something that's going to represent you long term and create value for organizations. And a lot of times it's hard because your close friends that you used to use a platform to talk and share things with will maybe give you a hard time, because nobody starts out being the massive influential personality. They all have that transition where they're like, all right, I'm going to shift my focus, I'm going to shift how I conduct myself into being this professional entity. And you don't have to change, you just need to operate in a way that is authentic to you, that's kind of like long standing. And so I think it's really important to start early. I think if you get a later start, it's still not worthless, but it's definitely critical to try to make that focus change at an early stage.
Yeah, great insights there. So maybe some of the other dimensions of areas of business that you work on, through your work investing in and advising sports technology companies via Mission 3A, what would you say are some of the trends in technology or athlete marketing that you're really excited about over the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years, but quite frankly, the speed at which everything is moving, certainly with acceleration of AI, even over the next year?
I'm super fortunate. I just was able to raise our Series B investment round and take more of an advisory role with Icon Source. I'm really fascinated in the sort of building process of businesses and that kind of 0 to 1 stage. And so, now that we've been able to establish Icon Source, I really wanted to find a way to continue that sort of like early stage build process. So I was able to join Mission 3A, which is a venture capital firm. They also have a venture studio, and we're really focused and obsessed with, as I mentioned before, the reallocation of ad dollars, the transition that's happening so rapidly right now from traditional ad buys, TV commercials, highly produced, content that's being served to an individual through old school traditional sources, to now powering the businesses that are opening those doors for brands to talk directly to consumers through authentic voices. And so, yeah, now I'm able to find these companies. We play seed, early stage investments, and hopefully work with these founders to not make the same mistakes that I made. Help them see clearly around corners. Because as a founder, a lot of times you're raising this capital and you're having to just make all these guesses with hires and big marketing events, and it's scary. A lot of times it's life or death for that organization. And so I'm super excited to be able to take a role that's a little bit different, and find these passionate founders and really help them be successful.
It's great. So moving and closing on some thoughts and some words, I guess, of inspiration and guidance to the young entrepreneurs out there. So when you think about your own journey, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs or athletes who want to innovate at these interesting intersections where sport converges with creativity, business, and culture? And certainly one could be paralyzed by all the different opportunities, and it's easy to get distracted by the noise and the toys, if you will. But how do you focus in on what matters most? Certainly if you're starting this journey, not only as an athlete, but if you have your eyes set on, being a future startup founder like you were early on in your career.
Yeah, I think you have to be kind of obsessed with an idea, an opportunity that you want to bring to life. And so I think that's like step one. And then I think a very important step two is really consult with other folks and other individuals, hopefully that are smarter than you, to get feedback. Hey, does this idea have scale? Is this being done? Why isn't this being done? Is it not being done because people haven't thought about it? Is it not being done because you can't make money doing it? The market's too small. So like getting those like tangible feedbacks. And then when you can take an idea that you're very convicted by and that you feel through some like sort of like early tests with individuals has potential wheels, you got to make a decision. Are you ready for this path? Because it is incredibly challenging and it's not for the weak and it's not to get rich. You need to do it because you want to create change. And through that, hopefully you get well compensated. But it's got to be something that you're incredibly convicted by. Otherwise, you'll just have a lot of heartache and a lot of wasted time. So, but on the flip side of that, you can also go get a job and join a big company and get fired at quarterly layoff. So
Sure.
I don't believe that there's any super safe boat. But when you're betting on yourself, you want to do as much due diligence up front as you can and say, okay, I'm ready to do this. And then you have to convince yourself, am I the best person on earth to do this? Like, look at your background, look at your knowledge, look at sort of like what makes you different to go after this idea. And then you just jump and you just run and you work nonstop and it's super fun.
Yeah, great words to live by, certainly. And your point around passion. Passion is so infectious, and people feed on that and are energized by that and are more willing and able to evangelize on your behalf. So it's great inspiration. And I guess the final question I have is, when you look back at your career, and you talked a little bit about this throughout our conversation, but is there a guiding philosophy or maybe a filter or principle that you push everything through when you're making those decisions? We all do self-talk, or we have that voice in our ear or on our shoulder, self-talk, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us try to live a life that's fulfilling and that you're proud of, and you kind of like have these internal debates. Is this what I'm put on earth to be doing? Am I spending my time in a meaningful way? Am I having a meaningful impact on the individuals around me? And I think that like in anything that you do, operating yourself with a way of excellence that inspires other people to do it. Whether you're a carpenter, a plumber, a tech builder, whatever it is, I think operating in a way that makes people stop and say, wow, that person, the way they interacted with me, like stood out and was different. And I think there's a couple ways that you can do that. And one is being interested in other people, not just using relationships as transactional opportunities, but genuinely wanting to make an impact with the people that you come across in a daily basis. And it goes a long ways. And so whether you're building a company, whether you're an athlete, or you're working at a large organization somewhere else, I think that you can weave those habits into what you do, and it just creates a much more fulfilling experience beyond trying to just make money or get famous. It's really of, what did you do while you spent time on this earth to affect other people?
Chase, fantastic. Again, words we can all live by, not just if we're in the world of sport, if you will, but it translates to life in business. So we're honored and fortunate to have you as a guest today. And thanks for sharing not only your journey, but some of the spots that were challenging, as well as how you overcame those. And I think we're all better for it. So with that, we appreciate you and look forward to the next conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Greg.